I want to dedicate today's episode to all the fun sponges out there. The people who tell us not to have fun and just enjoy what we like, or have to take some moral stance on things they don't understand or take time out to research. The people who feel the obsessive need to suck all the fun out of the room and be the moral busybodies who tell us what we should and should not enjoy. This episode is tribute to all of you, because without you, I never would have discovered Atelier Ryza. I knew the Atelier series existed, certainly, but I had no idea it was actually a super fun RPG series with a great crafting mechanic at its core. So here's to you, the holy earth and thous, and thank you. Please, tell me what I shouldn't play next. I'm dying to know. Greetings everyone, I am the Hipster Snek, bringing today a fairly recent Snek suite. We'll be looking at Atelier Ryza, Ever Darkness and the Secret Hideout, which I shall be abridging to Atelier Ryza henceforth because man, that title's a mouthful. Released in fall 2019 for PS4, Nintendo Switch and PC, Atelier Ryza is a 21st installment in TECMO's Atelier franchise, but as a soft reboot of sorts in that you needn't have played any of the prior games to understand the game's self-contained story. This is good, as this was also the first of the Atelier games that I ever played. However, fans of the franchise will find some welcome nods to the game's history. For example, about midway into the story I met a character who seemed too well designed to be a generic NPC, and she had her own questline. I expected her to maybe even join me at some point, though she never did. When I researched it, it turns out she was actually one of the heroines of a previous title. That's a fun little bit of continuity right there. But let's take a closer look at this installment in particular. The game begins on Kirkin Island, which is famous for its Kirkin fruits and freshwater supply that's controlled by the island soul Noble House. On this island is one Rysalind Stout, just call her Ryza, who grows ever ill at ease with the quiet, rustic, never-changing lifestyle of the island and her inhabitants. So she rounds up her closest friends, Lent and Tao, so she can lead the trio on adventures to the mainland, where ruins and monsters await. And while exploring the forest there, they find a clearing that they decide is ideal for them to construct for themselves a secret base of operations, hence the secret hideout of the subtitle, and make for themselves a home away from home. However, all is not well, as between the common issues that serve as the game's side quests on Kirkin Island from her residence, a strange, crystalline, beetle-like creature storms the forest, far too close for comfort for Ryza and company. Finding it impossible to defeat on their own and filled with questions, the trio soon make new friends, like the merchant's daughter Claudia, and the mysterious duo of the alchemist Impel and the warrior Lila. Impel takes Ryza under his wing, as due to a previous injury he can no longer practice high-level alchemy, and Lila takes to teaching Lent how to be the best warrior he can be. And Tao is also there. Honestly, I didn't find him all that interesting, and as soon as Claudia became playable, I immediately replaced him. Graphically, this game is amazing. The character designs are really fantastic, blending a soft anime style and world together seamlessly. Even the monsters, who can range from tiny, smiling slime creatures to enormous insects, living suits of armor, and even gigantic dragons, they all look like they belong. It helps somewhat that the shore interconnects with the frozen mountains, towering castles, and more. I just adore the way the game presents itself. Since it has anime-esque motifs, as I said, you can count on distinct visuals, both for serene environments and for the kinetic, frantic-paced battles. Special abilities look awesome in particular, with dynamic camera sweeps with the action picks up. More on this in just a little bit, but it goes a long way to show how this game presents itself extremely well. In that same vein, the music's a treat. Relying extensively on pop and rock themes, the soundtrack sets the mood perfectly. From the tranquil island residential areas to mysterious ruins to sweeping plains and beyond, the music is just awesome. Were I to nitpick it, however, the game lacks a really outstanding vocal track to punctuate itself with, which does seem to be the popular thing as of late. That aside, the sound effects are also really cool, be it the pleasant pings of the alchemy screen or the frenetic impacts of weapons over top monster skulls. You won't be disappointed. And while the game is mostly overdubbed, it's all in Japanese, so I really can't say too much other than I think the voices really do fit their characters, and I enjoy listening even if I do require the subtitles. And the game shines brightest with its gameplay, and Atelier Ryza is no slouch there either. While in town, you can talk to the townsfolk to learn the local goings-on and pick up side quests. Actually, let me touch on this a little since it is a strong suit of the game. So much of this game deviates wildly from traditional JRPG tendency for all NPCs to be part of the plot-progressing hive mind. Not everyone in town knows what you're doing at any given time, and most have their own concerns, many of whom will ask you to assist. In fact, some characters in town have entire quest lines that will ultimately run the course of the entire game's story. And while they have nothing to do with the game's core plotline, I've found myself deeply invested in many of them. For example, one NPC is a reporter and wants to write a newspaper for Kirkin Island like major cities have, but the town is so peaceful there's just not much to write about. So Ryza tells him stories about her travels to the mainlands. Then, later in the game, you meet the reporter's daughter and her friend, who begin to contribute in their own ways. Or a different one entirely of a young handyman trying to find a stable job, flirting with the idea of leaving the island forever, only to inadvertently remind an elderly man of his old passion for textiles and dyeing them. It's actually pretty funny how much of my rather extensive playtime was spent just bugging the townspeople and trying to see what I could help with, since I was having just as much fun there as I was killing monsters. Not to say that killing monsters isn't important. Going out into the fields is important for two major reasons: to kill monsters and gather materials. The former is both to advance the plot and to level up, which happens in traditional RPG format. And the latter is meant to expand what you can make in terms of alchemy at the titular Atelier, which has a skill level exclusive to it which goes up as you practice your trade. Let's talk about that first one before going deeper. Your general through line for plot progression is going to be killing monsters and exploring the ruins. Combat happens in a sort of real-time, sort of turn-based progression, where turns are represented by a bar on the side of the screen, with each icon representing a participant racing towards the bottom of the gauge. Once at the bottom, that turn triggers in sequence, allowing you to tap the corresponding button to make the character act. It should be noted that you only have control of one character at a time, and can leave the AI to dictate the habits of the others. Of course, you can also swap at any time, so that's really up to you. Personally, I tend to main either my lead attacker or healer as situation demands, and limit how much I swap around. This is in part due to the game's unique follow-up attack system. During battles, party members will recommend certain courses of action. For example, some of these can be like use an item or use a magic attack. And if you execute the recommendation within a certain number of turns, a party member will act out of turn for a bonus action against the enemies. This is a great way to rack up huge combos. Plus, this ties into the way the sort of action time battle bar works. Repeated attacks, particularly attacks that have elemental advantages, will push back the target's turn priority, possibly shifting turn order in your party's favor. And since items crafted via alchemy can be set as spells for your characters instead of being utilized as items, this creates an incredibly dynamic and potent combat system that never stops being fun and challenging throughout the entire game. To complement all this is the alchemy system itself. You can make all sorts of things by tossing stuff in a pot, apparently. You do this by way of slapping random things with Ryza's staff, which will eventually give rise to her being able to synthesize additional tools, like a hammer or axe, which have their own context-based uses, some of which can apply to the same gather points. For example, when at a berry bush, you can use Ryza's staff in order to get branches or leaves, or you can use a bug net to capture bugs from it, or use a sickle to harvest berries, or even the hammer in order to collect berry juice. It means that even the means by which you gather changes how and what you collect along the way. You then dump your bag full of goodies, which is limited in storage space but can still hold irrationally large amounts of stuff, into the storage at the Atelier every time you visit automatically. There, you take what you gathered and start crafting anew. You can also get recipes by doing quests, advancing the plot, or just talking to people and poking around. Doing is easier than explaining, and I feel I've already gone full fanboy this episode, so let me try to describe this as briefly as I can. Starting synthesis from the beginning involves finding the start point on the chart, which has a certain number of dots and a certain color, each one being of the primary colors, but some materials themselves can actually have more than one color ascribed to it. You then use materials that satisfy both the color and the number of dots in order to link to the next circle or circles in the chart, and continue to do so until you either max out the chart, run out of possible plays you can set on the board as your turns are limited, or you can opt to conclude early once a baseline minimum is satisfied. If you pursue certain optional circles on these charts, you can cause the recipe to mutate into a new form, granting an entirely new item from the framework of an old one. Many weapons will upgrade in this fashion once new crafting materials are obtained, for example. You'll need to do this for some plot-relevant items too, though those tend to have very simple requirements and low required alchemy levels. But if you want the best gear and items in the game, you'll need to work on this as often as you can. Which is fine by me, as I actually find the system incredibly satisfying and rewarding to work within. Further still are alchemy crystals every character has. Effectively, these behave as customizable spell slots. Say you craft a fireworks item, which behaves as a consumable fire attack. You can then slot the fireworks with all its unique properties gained from having been crafted into one of these slots and use spell charges rather than the item itself to repeatedly execute its function. Then you can rest at the Atelier in order to recharge them, rather than just crafting and spending a large number of resources in order to keep up the heat on your enemies. And then say you craft a better attack item and no longer need the fireworks item. Just take it out, put the new one in, and you can sell or use the old fireworks item at your discretion. Crafting items and selling them is a good way to build up gold in order to purchase much more useful things in the long run. And that's the gameplay loop. Simple, right? Was there anything I didn't like about this game? Well, there are times where the difficulty does suddenly spike, which sometimes demanded some back and forth until you level and craft enough to meet the challenge, which can at times be annoying, though I never felt that unfair. When it happened, I always realized a strategy was involved. Oftentimes the answer is just to fight smarter, not harder necessarily. Also, if you just hit a hopeless dead end and can't think of anything else to do but mindlessly grind, there is a difficulty switch that you can toggle at will anytime you're not in battle. Also, as an aside, I bought the deluxe edition with all the DLC, and honestly, some of the character-specific DLCs ended up very novel, but they didn't add that much to the overall game. I still had fun with them though. When I finally finished the game some 42 hours later, I just wanted more Ryza, I guess. And lucky me, as Tecmo Koei just recently announced that this game is to receive a full-on sequel, Atelier Ryza 2, due for launch sometime this very winter. Atelier Ryza was recognized early on as a fantastic RPG experience and was actually well received critically, and rightfully so, I say. As a result, this is one of those times where one of my reviews will end on a high note. And with that, the sign-off. This has been the Alchemist Snek. If you liked today's video, be sure to hit the like button so I know. For more like this every week, you can hit the subscribe and bell icons so you never miss anything. Leave a comment down below telling me what your favorite trio of characters was to use. Mine was Ryza, Claudia, and Lila. And for more from me, you can check out the Tomodachi Bros podcast, hosted on Podbean and YouTube, link in the description of every video. Thanks for joining me on today's Snek Suite, and I hope it showed you something new and interesting. Join me here every week for more like these, with obscure reviews, indie excellence, and more. And I will see you there.